And with me, Lord Falconer, Charles Falconer, former Lord Chancellor and one of Tony Blair's closest aides. Francis Maude, Shadow Cabinet Office Minister. The Respect MP, George Galloway. The historian, Maria Misra, who is a lecturer in modern history at Oxford University. And Fraser Nelson, political editor of The Spectator and columnist for the News of the World. Good evening. Well, good evening. Welcome to the Oxford Union. Just before we start, remember, as always, you can have your say on this programme. The issues will all be debated on our sister programme, Question Time Extra, on News 24, immediately at the end of this hour. And you can send us your comments, your emails as we go along right now. You can text us, 83981, CFAX page 155 will show you what other people are texting. And as always, you can email us at our website. Our first question tonight from Matthew Powell, please. Matthew Powell.
Are today's sanctions against Iran a further step towards inevitable military conflict, or can they help to resolve the situation peacefully?
George Galloway.
Well, they may be an alternative to military action. There is speculation that this is the State Department trying to fend off the hawks in Washington, or they may be a harbinger of a storm that's coming, and coming soon. I'm afraid, I fear, it's the latter rather than the former. The clock is running down on George W. Bush's presidency. At this stage, it will be remembered as an almost completely unmitigated disaster. So the temptation to put a double your money bet on the table with a regime-changing move against Iran is, I think, considerable. The most dismaying thing about today was the British government's immediate and clear support for US action, faster than anyone else. And that tells me that when Gordon Brown refused to do as Jack Straw had done a couple of years previously and declare war against Iran to be inconceivable, when Brown refused to do that, that told me that Britain is intent upon shackling itself again to Bush if he takes us over the cliff to another war with Iran. That's what's most dismaying.
Lord Falconer.
We've got to do everything that we possibly can do to make sure that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons. Everybody in the whole world wants that to be done without the use of force. We must be right, as the family of nations, to try to persuade Iran to dispense with anything that might be nuclear weapons by steps short of force. And the sanctions that have been imposed today are a sensible step in that direction. I believe Britain are right to support them. I think George is wrong to say it's a step towards the use of force. It's trying to resolve the problem without force, and we must be right to try and do that.
Isn't that what you said about Iraq? Isn't that what you've just said there is exactly what you said about Iraq. It's a last push for peace. It's a diplomatic initiative.
George, I'm not saying it's a last push for peace. What I'm saying is we are trying to find alternatives to force in order to ensure that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons, because the consequences for the world of Iran having nuclear weapons are terrible. So let's try everything we can to stop that happening.
What do you say to the point? What do you say to the point, or the observation George Galloway made, that Gordon Brown didn't follow Jack Straw in saying it was inconceivable there'd be war, and has fallen immediately behind these sanctions announced today?
I think he's completely right to fall behind America, and I hope the rest of the world does as well. In terms of not ruling out the use of force, he plainly, like all of us, doesn't want to use it, but he's completely wrong to rule out any option at this stage.
Okay. Man in the front there, you.
Speaking as someone who's studying history and listening to George Galloway, I'm reminded of the Allied politicians after World War I who failed to act against Hitler because of the scars they had borne in World War I. At the end of the day, if Iran merits intervention, then we must act.
Have you got your tin hat? Are you ready to go? Are you ready to go?
if the call goes out...
You want other people's sons to be killed?
If the call goes out and asks me to go and fight for my country, I will, because I love my country and I'm going to fight for it.
Me too, but I don't want to fight for George W. Bush's country.
Okay.
Prepared to fight for a more peaceful world.
Right, one last point.
Iraq cannot be an excuse for us to run away from Iran. That's all I'm saying.
Fraser Nelson.
I don't think that sanctions make war more likely. And the strange thing about this debate, we always assume that war will start by either Britain or America. I think the most likely event of war with Iran is if actually Israel makes strikes, because Israel is getting very worried. It's Israel who Iran say they want to wipe off the face of the earth. And it's so important that we avoid this conflict, that we cannot have negotiations without sanctions. The French foreign minister said this, actually. He was saying that if you're going to talk rough with Iran, if you're trying to get them to take away their nuclear program, you have got to show that you mean what you say when you talk. So I think if you're pursuing the peaceful path of negotiations, you must show that there is steel behind your threats.
Francis Maude.
Well, I agree with what Charlie Falconer and Fraser have said. I think it's inconceivable that anyone who's embarked on this course positively wants a war with Iran. No one in their right mind would. And I don't see how that these steps can possibly make war more likely and are likely to make it less probable. But, you know, the fact is that you have to show, the international community has to show that it means it, and that does mean stepping up the sanctions. And I hope the EU, I welcome what the government has said about wanting to encourage the EU to take stronger sanctions. I think the French foreign minister has made the same point. And the fact is that this is a threat, not just in the Middle East. Iran is the regime in Iran is very aggressive indeed, and have made... They may not mean it, and we don't know, but you've got to take them at their word. If they say, if the leader of Iran says he wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth...
He didn't say that, and you know very well he didn't say that. He said he wanted Zionism to be wiped off the page of history, just like he said Nazism and communism. When you wanted to wipe out communism, you didn't want to wipe out Russia. You didn't want to wipe out the Russian people. This was a political statement.
Well, George,
it's all right in the news of the world, but this is the Oxford Union, Francis.
George,
have a bit of intellectual rigour.
George, your record of George, your record of revisionism in this region gives you not a lot of right to be authoritative on this.
The woman there.
We're not going to take lectures from the man who congratulated Saddam Hussein on his courage and indefatigability.
All right. Yeah.
I'm just intrigued that people have mentioned the international community, because surely this is yet again with Iraq, whether it's right to take action against Iran, the US taking the initiative, doing what they like with the UK poodling on behind, and in not waiting for actually the UN and NATO and people to react as an international community. This is actually the same mistakes again.
Well, I don't know whether it's likely to lead to war faster or at all. It's clearly a mistake. It's a diplomatic mistake. We all talk about Western calculations here. I mean, what we aren't talking about are internal Iranian political calculations and equilibria. They're clearly not as straightforward as people think. There are clearly divisions within the regime there. And what needs to be asked, I think, before these kinds of policies are taken is what effect are they going to have on the internal politics in Iran? And the likelihood of this is that it's going to strengthen the hand of Ahmadinejad. It's going to strengthen the hand of hardliners. It's going to make him more popular. It's going to give him an excuse. It's going to give him a reason for why people are suffering economically in Iran as they are at the moment. However, the sanctions are unlikely to work because they won't have the support of the international community, they won't have the support of the Chinese, and they won't have the support of the Russians, who don't like to see the Americans throwing their weight around in the region unbalanced by anybody else. If the Americans are serious about diplomacy, then they should offer serious regional talks which will actually culminate in some kind of security pact guaranteeing the borders of countries in that region, and not talk about regime change, which I think plays very much into the hands of hardliners who, if one thinks about Iran's recent history, have every reason to fear the West.